I didn't love Godzilla minus one, right? I was like thinking whether or not I should make a review on it. I was thinking of like, maybe I should give my hot take opinions. Maybe I should like, talk about it. But like, it's one of those situations where I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's just my personal preference, right? Like a lot of people like the movie for what it is. I didn't like all that much. I thought it was kind of boring. It is what it is, right? You're not going to impress everyone, even with an objectively good film. That's kind of my take on it, is that it is an objectively good film. I just didn't care for it, right? Like things like that happen, right? And it kind of led me down this rabbit hole of thinking of just like how that rationale, that line of thinking kind of discredits the entire existence of mainstream film critics. Like I ended up like going down this rabbit hole of realizing just how worthless Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel really were, right? How they contributed absolutely nothing to film, how they never gave any interesting insights or like recommended any interesting gems and were pseudo intellectuals, talked down about other forms of media, especially video games in Roger's case. Like how they had terrible taste in movies, like were complete soy boys from like the 70s. Like they are scum, right? They were scum. And that kind of extends to like critics today, their successors, right? People like Grace Randolph, who are obsessively coming out and trying to condemn films for not conforming to her personal views, right? For not being like Hollywood blockbusters, for not being Hollywood, right? And that's kind of what modern film criticism and I would argue modern criticism in general has kind of devolved into, where it's not about evaluating an actual product, talking about its strengths and weaknesses, the things you didn't like, you liked and didn't like, the character arcs, the film, like the film, the artistry, the camera work, like it's about how effectively it pushes the agenda, right? And Grace Randolph is a really interesting person in this regard because I've come to realize, because I watched her video on Super Mario Bros. Movie, like I've come to realize just how strong of a sentiment like the anti-Japanese notion is in Hollywood, right? Because I think it's becoming increasingly clear that audiences that aren't completely brain dead are shifting over to Japanese media because they have comparatively less propaganda in them. They're more entertaining. They have better aesthetics, better animation, better storytelling, more attractive actresses, right? You have like all of these things that just make uh, Japanese entertainment like better than the stuff the West is producing. Like the only reason I think it's taken so long for the general population to become aware of this is because of like the stubborn refusal from like established critics and like the industry to accept this, right? To accept that like they were being outdone in this regard. But now that like this kind of thinking is mainstream, now that like people like me walk around with like kanji on their shirts, right? Now that like this stuff is becoming more and more mainstream, now that people are discovering manga, are discovering specific brands or specific series, some of which have been going on for like 40 years strong, right? Now that people are like, this stuff is becoming more and more popular, like it's becoming like the consensus among anybody who's actually seen this stuff, who's seen Kamen Rider, who's read Chainsaw Man, who's like watched the Attack on Titan anime, Japanese, who's played Nintendo games, right? Japanese entertainment is better. If you don't think that, you simply don't watch it, right? And that's been true for a long time, right? I've always preferred anime over other shows. The only reason I wouldn't watch it back in the day was because like we didn't have a lot of options, like no DVDs, like no ability to watch the shows I really wanted to watch, like whenever I wanted, right? Uh, and now that's no longer an issue. Now people are discovering like the wider world of this stuff. Like it's crazy. Like I can legit look at my phone and like see new manga chapters uploaded every day, right? Like new stuff in like series I love uploaded daily on the Shonen Jump app, right? Shonen Jump app, right? Like it's so crazy to think about when you compare it to like the Western comic book industry, right? How like they've produced nothing of value. Like what's the biggest literary masterpiece in like comic book history? Like what? Watchmen? Like The Killing Joke? Absolute crap. Like not even worth talking about. There's nothing to those books at all. They are not good. They're not well drawn. They're not interesting. There's nothing about them that's special other than the hype set forward by the industry, right? The comic book industry that wants to sell you on the idea that Alan Moore is a deep, profound thinker, someone who really understands the human condition and the problems that superheroes would face in a real society. Like it is more deep and complex than something you would get from an ordinary superhero comic. You know, Never mind that, like, none of that really works in a story. Like never mind that the story itself just isn't all that coherent and is just boring and is just doesn't mean anything and like has a weird social message to it that like anybody who thinks about it like kind of dismisses as just being absurd. Like Alan Moore is a straight up hack. All of these people that the industry prop up are hacks. Kathleen Kennedy, I think, is the go-to example now. But I think that extends to a lot of like old established industry talent. I'm kind of as I grow older, I start to realize like directors that were hyped up to me as a kid, people like James Cameron, Ridley Scott, like I'm becoming more and more aware of just how like terrible of creators they actually are. How they haven't produced anything more than like a handful of high quality products that have carried them through their entire careers, right? George R. R. Martin is someone I've had like a lot of distaste for. The entire producers behind the show, like Game of Thrones, like I have a lot of disdain for. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, like all of it is pure crap that only sells itself based on the idea that it has a legacy, right? Like that is Western entertainment. Like you consume it because it exists, because it has always existed, right? It is the best entertainment in the world because it comes from Hollywood, right? And more and more people are starting to wake up to the fact that that simply isn't true, right? Independent creators like me are rising up and taking away market share from literary publishers to the point where like I honestly don't even think publishers need to exist anymore, right? You have independent animators, independent game creators, and I think leading the charge is the Japanese creative industry. Like, I think in a lot of ways, the Japanese are becoming the premier entertainment center of the world because the stuff they put out is so insanely high quality, so good, so engaging, and just so unique, right? Not just in manga and video games, but like in so much. Like it's just kind of shocking how much a Godzilla film can accomplish, right? But people like Grace Randolph, they really don't want to admit it. They're doing everything possible to downplay this stuff, to pretend it's not that interesting, to pretend as if it's like being propped up by conservatives. Well, I suppose like if you're not in line with like the Hollywood agenda, with like the tribe, like that makes you a conservative by default because you're not going along with what they're doing. You're not like going along with their with what they want, right? So in a way, she's kind of right if she labels everyone that doesn't blindly worship the machine as being as being a conservative, right? But like that's really not true in a lot of ways. I think people everywhere feel this way about the current state of things. It's crazy to think about like how um, how things are developing right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.